Shattered Pieces by Orpheus Kidwell, Chapter 25. Not long after their encounter with Team Ruby, Naruto's group made its way to the abode of Vale's king, a large castle in the very center of town. He had calmed considerably since leaving Weiss's presence. Thankfully, Yami had taken over for a time, but this was something Naruto felt he had a responsibility to preside over rather than relying on his brothers. Are you ready, Lord Uzumaki? Zabuza wondered, asking what everyone was thinking. Yes, let's finish this once and for all. The group made their way up the marble steps leading to the entrance hall. Before the large wooden door stood a couple of guards, though hesitantly they allowed the group passage without any harassment. Once inside, the doors seemed to shut of their own accord. There was little reason to allow any interlopers in on this processing. After all, it was also likely used as a weak attempt at a scare tactic. But the group would not be phased. The entrance hall itself was rather grand, Naruto had to admit. Stone walls rose higher than he could see unaided, adorned with expensive-looking tapestries and paintings. Along either side there were marble pillars which served as the foundations for busts of every valiant king and hero that the kingdom had ever had. An enormous rug stretched from the now closed doors down the entire length of the hallway to the open doorway of the council room. That was where they were headed. Leading the way, they entered a chamber not unlike his own war room in Mount Glen. In a semicircle that faced the doorway, the nobles of Vale had gathered and looked down upon him and his group. They still think they're better than us, huh? Let me show them what inferiority really looks like. Ignoring Kurama, Naruto met their gazes without fear. Utilizing Boras, he forced the council chamber's doors to shut the same way the nobles had had the front door slammed behind him. Good afternoon, most esteemed councils of Vale. I am glad that we could meet on such a short notice. Naruto ensured that his aura was leaking just enough to cause some sort of distress to those seated, but not so much as to be noticeable. He also took stock of the fact that there were a number of cameramen focused on him. I see. Naruto, they're likely going to try and use whatever you say as propaganda against us. Your wording needs to be very precise and your actions non-hostile. Otherwise, Vel will simply vilify us. That was easier said than done, considering he had the head of their king. Still, it was advice he would take. I, for those of you who are not aware, am Lord Naruto Uzumaki of the grand city of Mount Glen. Over the last few days, your king and some of his nobles assaulted the property that is rightfully ours, and we acted in self-defense to ensure our livelihood and freedom. Your forces were turned away at our walls and retreated back to the safety of this city. We believe that this marks the best opportunity for bloodshed to end and for our two nations to part ways peacefully. Naruto let up on his aura's pressure, watching as the nobles seemed to remember how to breathe. After seeing how his aura affected Neo and a number of the civilians from his vassal villages, he realized that it was actually useful due to just how large it was. If he put up enough pressure, he could keep others unaccustomed to it from even acting, and then by pulling it back, it gave them some control again. It was disorienting. From what they told him, he knew it likely wouldn't be enough on its own to force a proper treaty, but it was the first tool he had and would use. But by what ridiculous logic would you claim sovereign Valen soil as your own? The man who spoke was one that Naruto recognized as Duke Beryl from the files he had on the nobles. He was one of the men that was most likely to try and press his claim for the throne, being one of Alexander's several dozen first cousins. It was unlikely that all of them would try and press their claims, but Beryl was an ambitious individual. According to both his file and Sir Argent, the man was suspected of killing his two elder brothers to gain his position, but evidence had never actually come to light to prove it. Mount Glen was not empty when we found it. It was infested with several grim nests and abandoned to the elements. Not a single scouting party or patrol interacted with us in the months we've been there. The villages in the surrounding area had to rely on first themselves and then on our protection because Vel refused to divert any resources to uphold their responsibilities to the peasants there. We stake our claim on the blood that has washed away any claim Vel has. We did what you could not. We eradicated the Grim. We rebuilt the city. We protected the villagers. We found value in something that you threw away, and you only wish to return now that you can see what it could have been had you put even a modicum of effort in. The ocean met the sky as the two blue-eyed individuals refused to back down, even increasing the pressure as high as he dared. He didn't actually want to harm the cameraman after all. The Duke's pride wouldn't let him break away. Your argument is weak on its merits at best, a capital offense at worst. The Duke replied evenly. You should be executed for your rebellion. Naruto smiled to the man, watching as his anger increased visibly. You already tried that and failed. Hundreds died for your pride over a city not even a tenth of the size of your capital, and not even a hundredth the size of your nation. We have no wish to expand outside of our home, but we shall defend it to our last dying breath. We don't celebrate the deaths of those conscripts you forced into a conflict they had no interest in, but any who try to take what we fought so hard to gain will not find us merciful. Let him whose blood waters the crops and whose bones feed the dirt hold the crown before him who lashes the whip and collects the tax. It is not a bad passage to live by, Lord Uzumaki. The next voice came from a man who was a man just as powerful as the Duke, Archpriest Ardelio Salinas. However, I fear that the nobles are not welcome to that sort of thinking. Not all of those who sought the crown were of blue blood, according to Argent. There were three competing churches in the kingdom. The Ardio had led the temple of the Creator for decades. He lived as much by his holy book as one possibly could, according to the knight. However, it was no secret that he despised the monarchy. For the reign of two kings, he had sought to have his temple proclaimed as well state religion. Having official support from the crown was finally ensured the other two were eradicated for good. Not to mention that status would likely come with material support from the nobility itself. Ardio wasn't after the throne, but what it would offer his faith. Is that a statement of support for the independence of my city? He wondered. If preying on weakness of spine was not a viable option, perhaps a rift could be taken advantage of. The archpriest paused a moment. I was never in favor of the assault on Mount Glen. However, regardless of my own opinion, I felt that I must be there to do what I could. We were not prepared and must take responsibility for our negligence and arrogance. So too does he who wins the battles and celebrates have a duty to admit his defeat and pay tribute for his pride. Our tribute has been paid in the lives of those who followed us. Even our dear king could not avoid the Reaper's scythe in the conflict we caused. He's clearly trying to attack the nobles at the same time. He's siding with you. Even if he lives by his book, it doesn't mean that he's necessarily trustworthy. Be careful with that one. At least the Duke is easy to read. Yami's words echoed through Uzumaki's head. As promised, I have brought with me your king's remains, part of them, that is. Looking to Zabuza, who he knew had a reputation amongst both the military and the huntsmen in Vale. He motioned him forward. If he revealed it, many would likely assume it was the legendary bloody Miss Zabuza who had taken the life of their monarch in combat. It would be best if he could keep from attracting too much of a profile amongst the wider world for now. Still, that was asking for a lot considering everything else about this meeting. To everyone but the Duke, Countess, and Archpriest that had been at the siege itself, the sight was shocking. The Karamen were likely not told that this would happen and were hard-pressed to keep a hold of their equipment. King Alexander the Fourth of Bastet, 72nd King of Vale, son of King Marcus the Third Bastet, and the end of the Bastet main family, dead like hundreds of others in his attempt to take my city. Activating Mother's will, Naruto caused the concrete floor to form a pillar, not unlike the ones outside, and had Zabuza place the lifeless head of the king atop it, like so many others busts that led to this room. The symbolism was not lost on the nobles that looked upon him. His death is not one I intend to happen, nor is it one that I celebrate. Kingslayer is not something I want anyone in my city to have as an achievement. I will return his remains after our negotiations are complete, along with those of all the men that we could recover after our battle, so that the families may grieve over their loss. I will also pay a were guild on each conscript killed to their families as part of our side of the treaty. Think of it as A land purchase, if your pride really can't handle our claim. The boy's direct gaze at Duke Barrel left little room to doubt who he was talking to. A weregild? I'm surprised someone as young knows about that ancient law. Countess Aqua, the third and final of those present who had been at the Battle of Montclair, spoke up. There are nobles here who likely don't even know what that is. Just where did you pick up something like that? The look in her eyes was dangerous. It reminded him of Cinder. Where I learned of it, it is of little consequence. If you truly must know, my brother is quite the bookworm. Montglen is ruled by Kurma, Yami, and myself, three brothers who grew up in the conditions that I would not wish on anyone. He was the one who taught me of it, and I thought that it would apply here. Therefore, I will personally ensure that the families of each man that was raised as a levy against his will is paid 3 years of his salary to make some atonement for the loss of life that was unnecessarily taken. That's what the Were Guild stipulates, correct? To ensure that it is all correct, let me state this simply. You are willing to offer us the bodies of all those who died in the battles, and will pay the families of each soldier a Were Guild, correct? What are you asking in return? For the record, Ardio wondered. The answer was obvious, but he was clearly acting officially here. He's likely acting as a neutral party in some capability to smooth negotiations. If we're speaking on the record, I'd like to make it clear that this payment I'm making is not a substitute for whatever stipend or payment these families may have expected from their liege lord. This is to be in addition to those. I will not pick up the slack for valiant nobles any longer. As for what I'm asking, that's very simple. Mount Glen is mine. It is under my protection and under my ownership. The occupants are my families, and those I allow in. Vel will reside. Vel will reside. Vel will receive their claim to it and officially recognize Mount Glen as independent in any and all capacities. This is my sole request, and one I will not back down on. If it is not to your liking, then there will be no treaty. Any further deaths that occur, should that be the case, will be entirely on the hands of the Vel nobility, leaderless as they are right now. Naruto's gaze was hard as he looked upon the several dozen nobles gathered before him. It was clear he was telling the truth. The amount of aura he was releasing certainly didn't help their dispositions. Duke Barrel eyed the boy with just as much determination. There is no reason to continue these negotiations. End of chapter 25. Shattered Pieces by Orpheus Kidwell, chapter 26. If it is war you wish to have, Beryl, it is war you shall receive, Yami stated as he took control, looking at the nobles, none of whom resisted what the Duke had said, even when fully restraining his aura. The purple-eyed boy focused on the Duke once more. Mount Glen will not falter in our defenses. We shall not fall to corrupt tyrants, and we shall not hesitate to strike at you when your civil war comes. I do hope you enjoy squabbling over the crown and the throne like the mangy dogs you are. The Duke scowled at the tone that Yami held, not understanding he was speaking to someone entirely different. Mark my words, Uzumaki, your rebellion will be punished for killing our king. You lot are no better than the White Fang. During a dust crisis, you are hoarding the greatest concentration of dust in Vel all to yourself. We'll see how well they function without their leader. As if that was some sort of signal, the walls that separated the council from the floor opened up to reveal a number of guards with firearms aimed at the party. Do you think we are scared of your men? Yami wondered. Just like the others, they will fall. Yami's tone was given with such finality, the guards hesitated a moment, slightly lowering the weapon's aim. That was the only moment that was necessary, and a flash of purple, crystal shards were embedded in their throats, soaking the expensive floor in fresh blood. Lord Uzumaki, it may be best to retreat to Mount Glen and prepare, Haku stated from behind his porcelain mask. Yami nodded, but felt it fitting to leave them with one last message. Your kingdom will fall just as your monarch did. For this, we sought to give you leniency, and you returned the favor with treachery. And just as Alexander, he channeled first spark through his aura, releasing a high-powered bolt of bioelectricity at the former monarch's severed head, causing it to combust. You will burn. With that, Yami erected a dome of stone around them so they could escape through Haku's mirror without revealing it. Vel's time would come, but not while Blake was in danger of being caught in the crossfire. When the dome went up, the front door swung open violently. What's going on in here? There was gunfire, and the guards at the front door rushed in and bore witness to dozens of corpses and burning, and the the burning head of their former king, and the large stone dome in the center of the floor. There didn't seem to be any immediate danger, so they lowered their weapons and looked up at the nobles for an answer. Negotiations were short, Ardeo stated with a hard look at the Duke. It seems our war with Mount Glen continues. Please return to your post. There are matters the council must attend to. The two nodded and left, closing the door behind them. I will leave you to it then. The temple has their own preparations to make. With that, the archpriest made his way out of the chambers as well. Naruto and his party returned to Mangalen's war room after walking through Haku's mirror. That went about how I imagined it would, Zabuza muttered with a sigh. What are your orders, Lord Uzumaki? Yami had disappeared and was replaced by Karma this time, much to the confusion of everyone involved. Fucking hell, you should have let me murder them, Naruto. The red-eyed boy seemed to only just then realize that he was in control. He scowled before shaking his head. Whatever, Naru and Yami are doing some thinking. As he said that, he tapped the side of his head. I'm in control until they figure out what we're gonna do. We're supposed to keep the defensive orders up, though. He wants to make sure that we aren't surprised by any attacks. Also, there's gonna be a meeting here tonight, so everyone need to be here for that. I shall deliver the message, Haku intoned as he disappeared through his mirror again. Gurren and Zabuza shared a look before both of their gazes fell upon Kurama. Why didn't we do something while we were there? There's little that could have stopped us from killing large portions of the military and civilian population if Naruto went all out. Sure, we wouldn't have the full power of the clan, but Haku could have brought them once we took the castle. What else? Kurama asked with a chuckle. Naruto didn't want to get Blake involved. This is our fight, and he doesn't want to bother either of his other older siblings with that footage, though. There's no way they aren't going to selectively edit it and make us look bad, though. Blake is going to end up getting involved either way. She's at Beacon, and Aspen knows about her connection to you. If she isn't held hostage, I'd be very surprised. Kurama simply smirked at that. Don't worry so much about that, Gurren. If he tried to do anything to her, there's nothing any of us could do to keep Naruto from rescuing her, and you know it. Just thinking about it, Adam would probably get involved too. I wonder if Vale could handle the entirety of Vale's White Fang and the clan crashing down on them at once. The crystal user shivered a bit at the thought. It's best if we could avoid that. I'm not sure how well he would cope with doing such a thing. Naruto cares and tries his best to protect us, but he's still just a boy. Are you just going to stay here until they come back out tonight? Zabuza asked Kurama. The boy sighed and nodded. As much as I'd like to go out and do something else, it's probably in our best interest for me to stay put. You to take care of things, all right? Zabuza and Gurren both nodded. Of course, Lord Uzumaki. Kurama then looked at Neo, who was waiting for her orders. I'm going to have to go in as well, but we need them to run the city without worrying about things. Neo, you're in charge of watching over and protecting Naruto's body while we're out. The girl's eyes lit up as she blushed with a wide smile. Look, as much as it would be fun to tease him about whatever you're thinking about, this is very serious. You need to be very aware of your surroundings. Don't let anyone touch us. Neo fought down her thoughts and nodded. I will kill anyone who tries. Kurama found himself in his usual chair. His brother's waiting for his return. It's all taken care of. So, what's the plan, Naru? There was a bit of silence before he replied. We're going to have to do a lot of things I don't like. If Duke Beryl becomes the new king of Vale, he won't hesitate to put everything into crushing us. I could see it in his eyes. I don't think he actually cares about Mount Glen itself. It's probably just his pride. If we just assassinate him, though, then Vale will have an even bigger reason to rally together against us. You don't want to be at war with Vale for any longer than necessary, right? Yami asked. When Naruto nodded, the more analytic of the trio continued. The main issue lies in two areas, I believe. First, the political landscape of Vale is a largely unknown factor for us. We don't know the relationships between the nobles, between the churches, who will side with who, or which candidates for the crown will attempt to rise up. The second is Aspen. We can be relatively confident in our ability to win this war with minimal casualties, even with our low numbers, unless he intervenes. We don't know how much we can get away with before the sage will try to intercede on Vale's behalf. Haku's going to have his work cut out for him at this rate, huh? Kurama commented. The longer they put off their next attack, the more time we have to set up defenses. But At the same, but the same applies to us, right? If we put Haku to work gathering info, the longer we hold off any offensive action, the more conscripts they can train, the more huntsmen they can enlist, and the more mercs they can hire. I'm not sure we have the option to get the loyalty of other settlements the way we did with our current vassals. Now, to point it out, we're at a distinct disadvantage in terms of numbers if it comes down to it, but I think that we can use that to our advantage. Monkland is large enough to house all of our vassals, and then some. If we can get them to reside here, that would leave us with only one location to protect. On the other hand, Vel is an enormous kingdom with nowhere near enough troops to keep everything safe. You want us to proceed down a road of guerrilla warfare then? Yami wondered. When Naruto shook his head, he couldn't keep his intrigue down. No. Then what are you thinking? Haku may be best used in a different capacity than espionage, he remarked. I'm thinking about it, and if we're going to enter into a state of all-out war with Bill, we have to allocate our resources very carefully. We have Sir Argent for intelligence gathering now. He's likely to have at least some idea of what relationships the various nobles have, who would have sympathies for our cause, and who we need to support in order to keep Vale from attacking us when they become the monarch. Kurama grinned as he understood. You want to use Haku to transport troops across Vale to places where they won't actually think we target. Then, when they send garrisons there, we target somewhere else far away. We force them to split whatever forces they can muster up, so that an assault on Mount Glen becomes strategically undesirable. I see. It's not a bad allocation of resources, Yami agreed. It does force us to be overly reliant on Haku, but not any more than we already were. He is going to have to be protected thoroughly to ensure we don't lose access to that ability. We also need to keep Sir Argent here until his loyalty can be guaranteed. Authenticating whatever information he gives to us should be a priority as well. He may have stated he was willing to work with us, but he is an enormous variable that we don't have any idea about. We could just kill him and be done with it, Kurama stated. Take his semblance, take his memories, and sift through them. It would be much less of a hassle if we took care of it that way. Naruto shook his head. No, that's not a good idea. Argent has more use to us than just his power and his knowledge. We would have to learn more to properly utilize his semblance before we could integrate it into our style, and one of us would have to dedicate our time to learning everything about what he knew instead of providing for the war effort. On top of that, Argent is someone that others in the Vale nobility would trust, and a person to cut into some of Vale's morale. If the personal guard of the former king sides with the rebels, there must be issues with the rest of the nobility, right? Or he was a traitor, Yami corrected. Still, I will agree with you on the other points. Killing Argent only creates more work than it alleviates. We must strive to be as efficient as possible with our resources in order to maximize our odds of victory. The support of the other three kingdoms will come in handy, and the recruitment of certain people under the queen certainly doesn't hurt. We do need to come to a decision at some point, though, since it has become clear two mutually exclusive parties are interested in us. We need to decide between the sage and the queen, Kurama summarized with a grimace. Noticing the first of the war council coming in, Nia looked at her lover's body, gently shaking it. She was relieved to see a pair of cerulean eyes revealed as Naruto opened his eyes. People are arriving, she let him know. Thank you, Neil. You can stay if you'd like, or you can do something else. The dichromatic girl made it clear with a look that she would not be leaving. You're going to stay with me then? I'm glad then. The blush that dusted her cheeks when he smiled made an amusing contrast to her serious expression, he thought. Sitting up straight, the blonde looked out amongst the room and saw that only Shikamaru, Zabuza, Hidan, and Argent had arrived so far. It didn't take long for the rest of the war council to make their way in. Sasori, Gurin, Tazuna, Kisame, Shizuka, Shibuki, Haku, and Kimaru made their way in within the next few minutes. Arjun had taken the seat to his left, with Haku, Shizuka, Tazuna, and Shibuki following. On his right sat Hidan, Kimaru, Gurin, Zabuza, Kisame, and Sasori, with Neo standing beside him. The double doors that led to the war room closed after everyone was seated. Let this meeting of the War Council commence. By my authority as Lord of Mount Glen, the official start was mostly for the sake of his appearance in front of his vassals. It was at the insistence of Neo, Gurren, and Yami that he finally gave in. The negotiations with Vale's nobility, as you may have heard, were a complete and total failure. Duke Beryl seems to have taken unofficial control of the council, likely in a move to curry support for his claim to the throne. Forgive me if this is incorrect, but I was told that Beryl tried to have guards gun all of you down, Lord Uzumaki. Sasori commented. Was that truly the case? And if so, why did you not slaughter the nobles after such a provocation? Naruto sighed. While that may have cut off their head, I could not risk it. The only conclusion that to what would have led to that was anarchy in Vale. While that may have been advantageous for the moment, it is ultimately not what we want. Anarchy in Vale means a civil war, which we were already hoping for. However, it is the kind of civil war that leads to more bloodshed that I'd like. It's the kind of power vacuum which has the other three kingdoms stepping in to create a puppet state. It's the kind of anarchy where others might be tempted to get revenge for the fallen families by attacking us. It's better for us to fight one anaconda than a den of pythons. Do you have a plan in place in case this sort of thing happened? Tazuna wondered. So far, the boy had proven a better liege lord than the king. That said, it all seemed like too much for just a kid. He wasn't sure how he kept such a cool head in a conflict like this. I had hoped that the nobles would be more amenable after losing so many of their number in their last attempt, especially with the conflict on the horizon as terrible as their civil war is likely to be. But we didn't put all of our stake into it. On the contrary, our visit to Vale was not done with only that in mind. How are your bugs doing, Sasori? As Kankuro and I thought, they're perfect. We weren't necessarily sure how well they would do so far away, but it turns out that our workaround is quite effective. Thanks to the SDC's telecommunications tower, we can easily keep track of everything the wasps observe. There is a slight chance of someone noticing the data, but I think we should be fine. It's the minimal amount of traffic considering the entirety of Remnant's online data and voice calling travels up through the relay system, and even if it is found, our data is encrypted extremely well. Wait, there are wasp drones inside a Vale now? How many eyes do we have in the city now? Shizuka wondered. Having something like that in the enemy's capital city was something ridiculously advantageous in their current situation. And what if they get a hold of one of them? Won't they be able to reverse engineer either the technology or the encryption? I assure you, Lady Shizuka, there is no need to worry. My wasps are built with security and espionage in mind. Should one be compromised, it will self-destruct with the power of a hand grenade. However, whoever tried to get it will not live to tell the tale, and it will likely bring down a building or two in the process. We are in a state of total war. It is likely the White Fang will simply take the blame for such an occurrence. I don't like it, but we can't allow this technology to reach Veil scientists. We're simply too small to lose this advantage, Naruto admitted. Sasori is right though, we're at war for our freedom. We've already killed their king and several high-ranking nobles. It was in self-defense, but Gurin killed around 2 dozen armed soldiers of Vale, probably police officers that didn't know what they were getting into. At this point, we can't turn back, and I'm not sure we would even if the choice was presented to us. We have to win. Then how do we win is the real question. Zabuza noted. Surveying the city is one thing, even if it can grant us vital information on possible targets. Getting in and out of Konoha would be nearly impossible without either Haku's mirrors or illusions of some sort. Is Vale our primary target or something else? I'd rather we leave Vale's capital city out of this conflict, if at all possible, the blonde admitted. I don't want to see Blake get involved in this, if I can. I know it's a selfish reason, so I tried to find other things that would suffice to keep us out. If we attack Vel itself, it would likely give the citizens reason to support the war, and whichever candidate was the most belligerent towards us would likely get the crown on that merit alone. On top of that, if we can find out which nobles, clergy, merchants, and officials are either sympathetic to our cause, can be bribed, or who can be blackmailed, then we can use Vel to our advantage. I think that I can help on that front, Sir Argent volunteered. There are quite a number of factions within the nobility even before His Majesty died. I imagine that things will only become more divisive from the here. There are a number of candidates that might sympathize with you, but I'm not sure any of them would make particularly good monarchs. On the other hand, there are a number of good potential monarchs, but they either would turn their eyes to Mount Glen, have no interest in the crown, or have far too weak of a claim to even try their hand. The issues are numerous for us on that front, but I think simply securing supporters and adequate supplies to make our own offensive should come first. A king candidate who would leave Mount Glen independent can be ascertained as we move forward. That was also my thoughts process, Sir Argent. Naruto agreed. Yami, Kurama, and I did our best to sift through possible strategies, and we've come up with a few concepts that we'll need to iron out with everyone. First thing we need is to ensure our defenses are properly set up to fight back against Vale's full force if they try another assault. Duke Beryl will not make the mistake King Alexander did. He saw firsthand how useless their levies and conscripts were. There is no way someone like him would make that mistake again. He knows of our artillery, of a fraction of our semblances, of our faunus population, and of our threat to you to and of our threat to use an air force based on Hako's intelligence of his meetings before they retreated. With this in mind, he is likely to bring in heavier forces and either their own air support or anti-air artillery. I'm sure that parts of the surrounding forest will either be burned to the ground or cleared cut. His options are limited in removing that obstruction, but both are potentially harmful to us. We are going to have to first ensure that Tazuna has all the proper materials and laborers he requires to fortify Mount Glen even further. After that is finished, I believe efforts should be made to create a few outposts which can be used to both keep an eye on our surroundings and to fire upon any intruders. We know they're coming and must be proactive. Besides our defensive measures, we also are going to do our best to bring in all citizens under my protection. Shizuka, Shibuki, and Tazuna, you will request at my behest that your people move into Mount Glen temporarily so that we may better protect them. There is plenty of room here for them and no grim infest us anymore. They will, of course, be compensated for labor they put into the war effort, and if they would like to remain here more permanently, deeds can be drawn up quickly. The issue of food is something that I think won't be a problem if we can establish trade relations with Vecchio and Mistral in exchange for a portion of our large dust reserves. I'm sure they'd rather better trade partners than the Schnee Dust Corporation after all. As for our offensive measures, this is a multi-part plan. Haku, you're going to be moved from reconnaissance and espionage and will be an important facet of our transportation and logistics. Utilizing your mirrors, I'm going to have you move our troops to raid various settlements and strategic locations. The point here will be to attack seemingly random targets and force Vale to send garrisons far away from Mount Glen to protect from future attacks. If we do enough of this, they won't have enough troops mobilized to meaningfully attack us. The majority of garrisons will likely be huntsmen, which only furthers our goal of keeping them as far away from both us and Blake as we can manage. More than that, though, we will need to do something that I know you may not like, Sir Argent. My niece, Manisama is still the nominal leader of the Valiant White Fang. If I can convince him to change up his targets to be more in line with our own goals, then it will go quite far towards us gaining an advantage over the Kingdom of Vale with less work. It would mean the Fang are blamed for things they likely wouldn't have done without my request, but it is important. I also trust in them to protect themselves more than I trust Nichan. Lastly, we need to come to the potentially largest decision this council will ever need to decide upon. Sir Argent, Shizuka, Shibuki, and Tazuna, you will be filled in on the details. The rest of you, we need to decide whether we have more trust in the sage or the queen to aid us in this war. I have no doubt that whoever we do not choose will be out for our blood and aid Vale. However, we will not be able to play them against each other. There is little doubt in my mind that they are not watching this meeting right now to try and gain an advantage with us. My brothers and I could not come to a proper decision. Thus, we must make it a part of this meeting or another. Our alliances needs to be strategically placed in terms of Mount Clan's and the clan's best interest. Naruto had spoken his piece. Now the council had to deliberate on the best course of action. Only time would tell if they made the right choice. End of chapter 26.